Hey guys, how you doing? It's like the middle of the night, my favorite time. Figure I'd do a recording. What the heck? First thing I'd like to do, um, talk about what's going on in Alberta. The conservative government there is pushing through legislation in order to, and let's be really clear, like they're not pushing through the legislation. All that they did, well, all that they did, but what they did is they, as a party, agreed amongst themselves that they were going to move through with the privatization of the healthcare system in Alberta. This, of course, being done in the midst of a pandemic, when all of the evidence is on the table to show that privatized healthcare is a complete failure, that it does not work. Any system that uses privatized healthcare has been absolutely a disaster. You can take a look at the United States to see the sort of pinnacle of this abomination. And so the conservative government, agreeing amongst themselves that they're going to be moving towards privatization when all of the evidence is on the table, just should tell you everything that you need to know about these sociopathic death cultists. They obviously just want to plunder the system. They don't give a shit about human life. They do want to murder people for money. Like, that's really what it is. Conservatism is a dead ideology, and I feel like, and I talk to people online fairly regularly who are still defending it. Because, I mean, there were Nazis who were defending Nazism even after the war was lost. So we should expect to see that kind of thing here in Canada as well. People defending this absolutely abhorrent, evil ideology. Now, in response to this, I'm happy to report, and I'm happy to see, that the healthcare workers in Alberta walked off the job. I feel like, and they're doing that before the legislation is even being put forward, which I think is correct. Even the hint of a suggestion that the healthcare system should be privatized should result in strikes, which is exactly what's happening, which is exactly what this country needs more than anything. What this country needs more than anything is a full-scale general strike. And if it starts with the healthcare workers, so be it, right? But we should shut this country down. It should be a full-scale general strike. Every single leader in every single position should be removed from power. It should resign, in my view. I include the Liberals, I include the Conservatives, and honestly, like, the NDP are not impressing me at all. One of the corrective things I'd like to say, in one of my previous videos, I sort of celebrated that the BC NDP took over, and then quite a few people corrected me on my position. I mean, I'm happy to see that the Conservatives and the Liberals are being extracted from those processes, but it looks like the BC NDP are just another business party, that they've been taken over by business interests, and that they are pro-fracking and anti-environment and all this kind of insane nonsense that is part of the death cult. And that's why I can't support parties that support capitalist systems. That's why I call myself a communist, because capitalism is irredeemable. It can't be reformed. A person who is standing up and saying, I want to stop climate change and I am pro-environment, but I'm also a capitalist, is either delusional or a liar at this point. And it's just how we have to look at it. Because these capitalists are ruthless and sociopaths, right? And so we have to be equally ruthless against them. We have to. We don't have an alternative. Because their plan is to destroy the ecosystem and collapse the civil society. Like, one of the things that keeps happening to me with these conservatives that I'm talking to, like, they seem to think we're having a minor disagreement. Like, that's how deluded they are. That's how deep down the rabbit hole of their own idiocy they've gotten. They think that we're just having, like, oh, well, we should, a carbon tax versus a cap and trade, okay, this versus that. They think that we're like, they think that we're talking about pennies, and I'm talking about blood, right? Like, they think that we're talking about just like small change issues of minor importance, and I'm talking about the most important issue that humanity has ever faced. Like, this is what we're dealing with. And honestly, my favorite thing is making these conservatives. I mean, and it makes sense that this happens. But when you point out that their ideology is an evil death cult, they lose patience and they reveal themselves as sociopaths. The level of nonsense, or at the very least, they reveal themselves as completely illiterate, right? Which they are. They don't even read their own Bible. Like, their illiteracy is staggering. And you have to be illiterate if you're going to be a capitalist. Like, the second you become literate, you cease being a capitalist just by the force of it. Right? You can't maintain the position that capitalism is a good system if you know anything about it, right? You can only say that if you have no idea what you're talking about. Because the minute you do any research whatsoever and have any of this explained to you at all, you have to stop being a capitalist just by the force of incredible evil that capitalism brings into the world. But it looks to me as though there are people standing up against it here in Canada, which is good. It's baby steps. It's a start. Like, we needed to shut this country down a decade ago. 10 years ago, we needed to have full-scale general strikes. We needed to shut down industry. We needed to shut down the parliamentary government. We needed to shut the entire thing down. We needed to make it very clear to the populace and to each other and to our leadership that this system is dead. It's a shambling corpse that we keep propping up. But instead of doing the right thing, which is shutting it down, putting it in the grave, we keep propping it up. It's like the most morbid version of Weekend at Bernie's you've ever seen. I don't know if you're familiar with Weekend at Bernie's, but it's about two young gentlemen who get invited to a fellow's. He's a rich man and he invites them over to their place, and and in the interim he dies, and so these two young men decide that instead of acknowledging that he is dead, they pretend as though he is still alive, and it's essentially a movie that has a series of prop jokes where the prop is a corpse. Very morbid to talk about and to think about, but it's exactly what we're doing. Capitalism is a failed system. It's dead. It can't. The ecosystem itself, nature itself, wants capitalism to die. Right? Really think about that. Really think about that. The system that spawned us and that we live in wants capitalism to go and is willing to destroy humanity to get rid of it. That's what we're looking at. That's the system that we exist in. And we're all just head in the clouds, la 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 la, just going on with our daily life, pretending like nothing is happening when we're facing the largest crisis that humanity has ever faced. And there's a section of our populace, a good section too. It's not like 5%. We're talking about like 25 to 30% of the populace whose position is we should maximize the damage, we should cause as many problems as we can, we should destroy humanity as fast as possible. That is their position. And if you actually present it to them like this, then they cry. Right? These conservative types who say things like liberal snowflakes and all this kind of stuff are the most fragile people in the world. Right? Their entire sense of self is wrapped up in the idea of exploitation and domination of their surroundings. And if you say to them, no, we can't exploit we can't exploit anything anymore. We can't dominate each other any longer. Then they don't know who they are, because their whole sense of self is wrapped up in the domination of their surroundings, right? And if they're not permitted to dominate and exploit, then who are they, right? It's their entire identity. And of course, they have built an ideology to delude themselves into believing that dominating and controlling everything around them is good, right? That's why you get these sort of Petersonian, Peterson-esque, Petersonian. I like Petersonian. I'm going to stick with Petersonian. That's why you get these Petersonian kind of followers who basically erect a neo-fascist ideology of the heroic self, right? That everything is up to the individual, that there is no society, there is no community, there is no system that is larger than an individual man, right? This kind of heretical, evil ideology of a death cult that denies the existence of super systems. To put it in theological terms, they deny the existence of God. That an individual man should be able to be his own force of power should be enough to get whatever he wants. And if he can't, it's just because he is weak. But only weak when compared to other stronger men. Certainly not weak when compared to the totality of the entire ecosystem, right? That the superstructure that we live in is something that we should humble ourselves against. The conservatives, even though they clutch onto a Bible that tells them exactly that they should humble themselves before the force of their environment, or to put it in those theological terms, they should humble themselves against the force of God, right? The might and wrath of God. But they don't read the book, and they certainly don't think about it in these secular kind of terms, right? That this is one of the great things that I think the left should do. The left should absolutely seize back the language of the Bible and simply begin quoting Bible verses at these illiterate sociopaths, right? We shouldn't be attempting to argue against them because they don't use logic or reason. They don't care about that. We should use the language of the book that they claim for themselves, right? Which they don't read and they don't understand. And if you simply started to quote verses to their arguments, such as they are, then it would humiliate them. Or certainly make them begin to think about the evil ideology they espouse, right? Because they think that they're good. They think that they're on the side of God, even though they completely abandon any principles that exist in the book they claim to follow. And it's gotten so obvious and so clear that one-liner quotes do it. You don't need to get like a big espousing philosophy. You don't need to get into Thomas Aquinas. You don't need to get into Calvin or any of this kind of stuff. You don't need to get into big theological or philosophical conversation, right? You don't need big long tracts. You literally can just say one line, right? And and they're unable to respond because they're not thinking, and they don't exist in this sort of thinking space. Like when Ben Shapiro says things like, we shouldn't have empathy in political conversations, right? You can quote to him the line in Deuteronomy, because he's a Jew, he doesn't respect the New Testament, but you can respond with a one-line quote from Deuteronomy where Moses says, if you don't use love while interpreting the law is meaningless. Like, so Ben Shapiro stands in opposition to Moses, who's a person that he, by the force of his faith, must acknowledge and listen to. Although he doesn't, because he doesn't actually read the book and he's illiterate. So I'm glad to see that the healthcare workers of Alberta are standing up. Next is the tradespeople, the teachers, the fire department. I don't expect anything from the police department. The police department's just going to do what the powerful say. They don't really have a moral position. Although if the police forces actually did stand up, and if the military actually did stand up, like, this is something I think about all the time. How is this not a national security risk at this point? How is ignoring climate change and doing everything you can to make the situation worse not a national security risk? How is it that the military themselves are not protesting? How is that the case? And so we need more strikes. We need more strikes. That's really what we should be focusing on. Organizing full-scale strikes. I just think about that climate rally we had. I think there must have been 100,000 people in the streets. And we all just went home. We all showed up, waved our little flags, went rah, 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 shouted into megaphones, and then went home. No. Don't go home. Don't go home. March to City Hall and occupy it until they start passing legislation that makes sense, or they force the police to clear them out. March to these people's houses. I don't understand why this has become sacred and sacrosanct in Canadian politics. Like, we know where these people live, right? And they're passing legislation in order to destroy our families and destroy our lives and destroy our ecosystems and ensure that the destruction and the suicide of humanity is enshrined in law. Show up at these people's houses. Go to their houses. But they can assault and attack and destroy us, but we've got to stay. Ooh, that's too much. So we're being destroyed by our own cowardice in the end, and our own gullibility. We don't really there is a part of us, I think, that is just like, let it be over. I do think so. That there is just a part of us that says, oh, maybe it'll just be over and I'll be dead and it'll be fine. Anyway, that's the end of me, guys. I'm out of time. Like, share, subscribe, send it around. Start organizing. Meet your neighbors. Talk to them about climate change. We need to be organizing more heavily than we are. We're too casual. Far too casual. All right. Well, good luck.